Korean Mafia invites nerdy black lady for a laugh, but is shocked when she stuns with new man. Seoul never slept near the docks. Even past midnight, the air buzzed with the low hum of engines, murmured deals, and the distant clang of metal containers shifting like restless beasts. Neon signs flickered above cracked pavement, painting the fog with colors too bright for a place so unforgiving. This was Kang Jun-suk's territory. The name alone made men straighten their backs and lower their voices. He was the youngest son of Kang Tae-jin, the Dragon Crown Syndicate's iron-fisted patriarch, and unlike his older brothers, Jun-suk didn't need to shout to be feared. He smiled. He joked. He humiliated. And people learned quickly which hurt more. Jun-suk sat in the VIP lounge of a private underground club, one leg crossed casually over the other, black suit tailored so perfectly it looked poured onto him. Gold light glinted off his watch as he swirled his drink, eyes half-lidded with boredom. Around him, his men laughed too loudly, desperate to entertain him. "Hyung," one of them said leaning forward, "you remember that cafe by Pier 9? Jun-suk raised an eyebrow. "The quiet one? The one with the black girl?" Another added, snickering. "Always reading. Thick glasses. Braids that look like she forgot halfway." The men burst into laughter. Jun-suk smirked, but something flickered in his eyes. Not interest, not kindness, but curiosity sharpened by cruelty. "I've seen her," he said. "She looks like she'd apologize if you bumped into her." "Exactly," one of them said. "You should invite her to the Dragon Crown banquet." The laughter died for a split second. Then exploded. Jun-suk leaned back, considering it. The Dragon Crown banquet wasn't a party. It was a display of power, a night where mafia families, business sharks, and politicians drank together under crystal chandeliers while silently measuring who would bleed next. Inviting her there would be absurd. Which was why it felt entertaining. "Why would I do that?" Jun-suk asked lazily. One of his men grinned. "Because she'd actually think you mean it." The words settled. Jun-suk's smile widened slowly. "Find her number." Amara Lewis hated closing shifts. Not because the cafe was dangerous, though it was, but because nights left too much room for thoughts. During the day, customers came in waves, conversations overlapped, and the world moved fast enough that she could hide inside her routine. At night, everything slowed. The cafe near Pier 9 was nearly empty. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the neon lights outside into watercolor smears. Amara wiped down the counter for the third time, even though it was already clean. She adjusted her oversized sweater, tugging the sleeves over her hands. Books were stacked beside the register: economic theory, contract law, old philosophy texts scavenged from second-hand shops. She read between orders, during breaks, whenever the world allowed her a moment. She didn't belong here. She knew that. But belonging cost money, connections, confidence, all things she was still learning to collect. The bell above the door chimed. 3 men in expensive coats walked in, eyes scanning the room like they owned it. Amara's shoulders stiffened. She recognized them. Everyone did. Dock enforcers. Dragon Crown affiliates. She lowered her gaze instinctively. "Coffee?" she asked softly. One of them leaned on the counter. "You're Amara, right?" Her heart skipped. "Yes." "Someone wants to invite you somewhere." She blinked. "Who?" The man smirked. "Kang Jun-suk." The name landed like a dropped glass. She'd seen him once, weeks ago, standing across the street in a black car, laughing with men who looked like weapons disguised as humans. His eyes had briefly met hers through the cafe window. She'd looked away immediately. Why would he remember her? "I think you have the wrong person," she said carefully. The man slid a phone across the counter. A new message glowed on the screen. "Come to the Dragon Crown banquet. Dress nicely. I want to see you there." No emojis. No explanation. Just entitlement. Amara stared at it, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Is this a joke?" she whispered. The man shrugged. "Depends what you make of it." They left without another word. That night, Amara sat on the edge of her narrow bed in her tiny apartment, phone clutched in both hands. The room smelled faintly of old books and instant noodles. Outside, sirens wailed and faded. Her reflection stared back at her from a cracked mirror, braids pulled back too tightly, dark circles under tired eyes, glasses slipping down her nose. She laughed once. A small, bitter sound. Why would someone like him want someone like me? She imagined walking into that banquet, men in suits turning to stare, laughter curling behind polite smiles. She imagined being the joke before she even opened her mouth. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Then she remembered every time she'd been overlooked. Every time someone spoke over her. Every time brilliance went unnoticed because it didn't wear lipstick or heels. Slowly she straightened. What if it's not a joke? She whispered to herself. Or worse, what if it is, and I go anyway? Amara exhaled. Her reply was simple. I'll be there. She set the phone down, heart racing. Across the city, Kang Jun-suk read the message and laughed, raising his glass. The game had begun. And neither of them yet understood who would be humiliated in the end. The Dragon Crown Hotel stood like a monument to arrogance. 40 floors of glass and steel pierced the Seoul skyline, glowing gold against the night like a throne no one dared challenge. Valets in black gloves opened doors for men whose names were never written down, only whispered. Security stood everywhere, expressionless, armed, trained to kill quietly. This was not a place where mistakes were forgiven. Amara stood across the street, clutching her small handbag like a lifeline. For nearly 10 minutes she didn't move. The hotel entrance reflected her back at herself, sleek marble, mirrored columns, a parade of power flowing in and out. She looked small. Her dress was modest but carefully chosen, midnight blue, simple lines, no glitter. Her hair was neatly braided, pulled into a low bun. Her glasses, she almost didn't wear them, but without them the world blurred and she refused to stumble tonight. Just walk in, she told herself. Her feet felt heavy as she crossed the street. The moment she stepped onto the red carpet, the temperature changed. Conversations dipped. Eyes slid toward her, curious, dismissive, sharp. She felt them measuring her worth in seconds, and finding none. A hostess smiled politely, but confusion flickered behind her eyes. Invitation? She asked. Amara handed it over with trembling fingers. The hostess scanned it once, then twice. Her posture stiffened. This way, Miss Lewis. That alone drew attention. Inside, the ballroom unfolded like a dream she didn't belong in. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like frozen waterfalls. Long tables gleamed with silver and glass. The air smelled of expensive perfume and unspoken threats. Men in tailored suits stood in clusters, laughter calculated. Women glided past in dresses worth more than Amara's yearly rent, eyes sharp as blades. She felt naked. A whisper followed her. Who is that? Is she staff? Why is she here? Amara kept her head high. You belong where your feet are, she reminded herself. Then she saw him. Kang Jun-suk sat at the central table, relaxed, dominant, one arm draped over his chair like he owned the world. His black hair was perfectly styled, his smile lazy, cruel. He noticed her immediately. Their eyes met. His smile curved slowly, like he'd just unwrapped a gift. Amara, he said loud enough for others to hear. You came. A ripple of amusement spread through the room. She walked toward him, every step echoing too loudly in her ears. Yes, she said quietly. Jun-suk's gaze traveled over her, assessing, judging, amused. You look, he paused deliberately, comfortable? Laughter erupted. It hit her like cold water. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't look away. Thank you, she replied simply. That surprised him. He gestured to an empty table near the edge of the ballroom. Sit. Enjoy. Not with him. Away from him. The message was clear. She obeyed. The table was set for two. One chair empty. It screamed louder than words. Waiters moved around her as if she were invisible. Wine glasses remained untouched. Plates were served and cleared without anyone asking if she wanted anything. She felt like a prop. Across the room, Jun-suk's laughter carried easily. Every now and then his eyes flicked toward her, checking, is she still there? She was. She watched the room instead. She watched power exchange hands in nods and smiles. She watched alliances form over shared jokes. She watched women lean close to men who barely listened. And she realized something chilling. This world wasn't elegant. It was predatory. And she was meant to be prey. A man at a nearby table leaned toward his companion. She's brave. Or stupid. Probably both, the other replied. Amara's fingers curled in her lap. You can leave, a voice whispered inside her. But another voice, stronger, answered. No. You were invited. You stay. Midway through the evening, Jun-suk stood, glass raised. The room quieted instantly. To friends, he said smoothly. To power. And to unexpected guests. Eyes turned to her. A few people laughed openly now. Amara felt it then, not just embarrassment but something sharper. Anger. She rose slowly from her chair. The sound of her heels against the marble floor echoed like a challenge. Jun-suk tilted his head, amused. Something you'd like to say? Yes, she said, voice steady despite the storm in her chest. I'm just waiting. For what? He asked, smirking. She met his gaze fully. For the rest of the invitation. A beat of silence. Then laughter. Jun-suk leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. You're funny. I didn't know nerdy girls had jokes. She didn't flinch. I didn't know powerful men needed audiences to feel important. That got a few raised brows. Jun-suk's smile sharpened. So tell me, he said casually, did you come alone? The question was a blade disguised as curiosity. The room leaned in. Amara exhaled slowly. No, she said. The air shifted. Jun-suk laughed. Really? Then where is he? Amara turned toward the entrance. And for the first time that night, she smiled. The smile on Amara's face didn't belong in that room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't smug. It wasn't nervous. It was calm. And that unsettled Kang Jun-suk far more than tears ever would have. For a brief moment, the ballroom held its breath. Jun-suk straightened slightly in his chair, studying her with renewed interest, as if she'd suddenly changed the rules of a game he thought he controlled. You didn't come alone, he repeated, voice smooth, amused. Then by all means, introduce him. Laughter rippled again, softer now, uncertain. Amara didn't answer immediately. She stood there, hands relaxed at her sides, shoulders no longer drawn inward. The whispers that had clung to her all night seemed to slide off her now, as if she had stepped behind invisible armor. I will, she said quietly. When he arrives. That earned a few snickers. Jun-suk lifted his glass. Ah, so we're waiting. Yes. For how long? He asked. Amara tilted her head slightly. As long as it takes. That was when someone muttered, delusional. Another laughed. Poor thing. Jun-suk waved a dismissive hand. Sit down, Amara. You're embarrassing yourself. The word embarrassing was deliberate. It landed. For a split second, the room expected her to crumble. She didn't. Instead, she walked back to her table and sat with measured grace, folding her hands neatly in front of her untouched plate. And she waited. Minutes passed. Conversation resumed, but the energy had shifted. Eyes kept drifting toward her table. Curiosity crept in where mockery once lived. Jun-suk pretended to lose interest, laughing loudly with the men beside him, but his gaze flicked toward her more often than he realized. Why isn't she leaving? Most people would have fled by now, humiliated, broken, desperate to escape the stares. That had been the point of inviting her in the first place. But Amara remained. So, unmoving, unashamed. A waiter approached her hesitantly. Would you like some wine, miss? She looked up, surprised, then nodded. Thank you. As the glass was poured, Jun-suk noticed something else. Her hands weren't shaking. Across the room, an older man leaned toward Jun-suk. You know her? Jun-suk scoffed. Barely. She works at some dock cafe. The man frowned. She doesn't look like she's bluffing. Jun-suk smirked, though unease curled in his stomach. You're giving her too much credit. Still, something gnawed at him. He leaned forward again, voice cutting through the chatter. Tell me, Amara. What does your mystery man do? The question was bait. Amara sipped her wine before answering. He builds things, she said simply. Laughter. Buildings? Someone asked. Empires? Another joked. She met their eyes, unbothered. Both. Jun-suk laughed loudest of all. You're enjoying this, aren't you? No, she said honestly. I'm enduring it. The honesty startled the room into silence. You invited me here, she continued, voice even. You wanted to see me. So I stayed. That's all. Something tightened in Jun-suk's chest. He hadn't expected dignity. The humiliation escalated subtly after that. A woman in a red gown deliberately took Amara's empty chair and slid it closer to Jun-suk's table, forcing Amara to pull another chair over herself. Someone spilled wine near her feet and didn't apologize. Another guest asked loudly if the help could clear their plates. Each slight was small. Together they were crushing. Amara absorbed them all. And stayed. Inside, her heart pounded so hard she was afraid others might hear it. Every instinct screamed at her to disappear, to shrink, to fold inward like she always had. But she remembered something her mother once told her. People decide who you are by how long you stay standing when they want you gone. So she stayed standing. Jun-suk finally rose again, irritation bleeding into his voice. You know, he said, circling slowly, I admire confidence. But there's a line between confidence and fantasy. He stopped in front of her table. You really expect us to believe someone important is walking through those doors? For you? Amara looked up at him. Yes. A dangerous edge entered his smile. Then let's make this interesting, he said. If no one shows up in the next 5 minutes, you leave. Quietly. The room leaned in. And if he does? Someone asked. Jun-suk chuckled. Then I'll apologize. That earned laughter. Amara considered him for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes, she said. Jun-suk glanced at his watch. The countdown began. Minute 1. Nothing. Whispers grew louder. She's done. This is cruel. She should have left earlier. Minute 2. Jun-suk crossed his arms, smug. Amara stared at the doors. Minute 3. Her palms began to sweat, but she didn't move. Minute 4. Jun-suk smiled triumphantly. Looks like. The ballroom doors opened. Slowly. The sound cut through the room like a blade through silk. Conversation died instantly. Amara exhaled. And stood. The sound of the ballroom doors opening wasn't loud. No dramatic bang. No announcement. Just the soft, deliberate click of polished metal unlocking. And somehow that sound carried farther than gunfire. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Laughter cut off awkwardly. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the music, low and elegant just moments before, felt suddenly wrong, like it didn't belong anymore. Amara felt it before she saw him. The shift in air. The tightening of the room. The instinctive awareness of danger that rippled through men who had survived it. She didn't turn right away. She didn't need to. Because Kang Jun-suk had gone very, very still. His smug expression collapsed into something harder, sharper. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed, not in amusement now but in recognition. The man who stepped through the doors didn't look flashy. No gold. No entourage. No wasted movement. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly cut black suit that looked functional rather than decorative. His hair was neat, his expression unreadable, his presence heavy, like gravity had decided to take human form. Every Mafia head in the room knew him. Park Minjay. The man who controlled the eastern docks without ever appearing in photographs. The man whose name didn't circulate in gossip because people were afraid to say it out loud. The man whose deals ended wars before they started. He didn't pause to scan the room. He walked straight in. The click of his shoes against marble echoed like a countdown. Step, step, step. Amara turned. Their eyes met. Relief washed over her, not dramatic, not explosive but grounding. Like touching solid ground after free falling. You're late, she said softly. Minjay's lips curved into the faintest smile. Traffic. The simplicity of the exchange hit the room like a slap. He pulled out the chair beside her without asking permission from anyone. And sat. Silence reigned. Not awkward silence. Fearful silence. Jun-suk recovered first, forcing a laugh that rang hollow. Well, this is unexpected. Minjay didn't look at him. He reached for Amara's hand instead, lifting it gently, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Slow, deliberate, intimate. She doesn't like to be rushed, Minjay said calmly. I told her I'd meet her here. That was when murmurs exploded. You know him? That's Park Minjay. Why is he with her? Jun-suk stood abruptly. You didn't mention you were bringing him. Amara adjusted her glasses. You didn't ask. Minjay finally turned his gaze toward Jun-suk. The temperature dropped. I heard you were hosting, Minjay said. So I came. Jun-suk swallowed. This is a private event. Minjay tilted his head slightly. So is my patience. A few men shifted in their seats. Jun-suk forced a smile. We were just joking. Amara's hand tightened in Minjay's. He noticed. Minjay leaned back, studying the room with calm assessment. You invited her. Yes, Jun-suk said carefully. And you laughed. Pause. People laughed, Jun-suk corrected. Minjay nodded slowly. People follow examples. He turned to Amara. Did you eat? She shook her head. Minjay lifted a finger. Instantly a waiter appeared, pale, nervous. Bring her dinner, Minjay said. And wine. The good one. The waiter nodded frantically and disappeared. The humiliation reversed itself in real time. Jun-suk tried to regain control. You're overreacting. This was harmless fun. Amara spoke before Minjay could. I was never confused about why I was invited, she said quietly. I just wanted to see if you'd admit it. Jun-suk's eyes flicked between them. Minjay smiled faintly. She does that. Asks questions people don't want to answer. And what exactly does she do for you? Jun-suk asked, irritation bleeding through. Minjay's gaze sharpened. She thinks. A ripple went through the room. She renegotiated 3 port contracts your family lost last year, Minjay continued. Without raising her voice. The room went cold. Jun-suk's face drained of color. That's impossible, he muttered. Amara met his gaze. You never noticed who was sitting at the cafe table every night when your shipments stalled. Recognition flashed across Jun-suk's face. The girl with the books. Minjay leaned closer. You laughed at her. I didn't know. You didn't care, Minjay corrected. The waiter returned with food and wine, setting it carefully in front of Amara. Minjay didn't look away from Jun-suk. You challenged her to wait 5 minutes, he said. That was unwise. Jun-suk stiffened. You expect me to apologize? Minjay considered it. Yes. And you will. The room held its breath. Jun-suk glanced around, at the men who had once laughed with him, now avoiding his eyes. Power had shifted and everyone could feel it. He looked back at Amara. She raised a hand gently. No, she said. Not to me. She stood. The entire room stood with her. Apologize to yourself, she continued, for thinking humiliation makes you powerful. She took Minjay's arm. We're leaving. Minjay rose with her. As they walked toward the doors, the crowd parted without a word. Behind them, Kang Jun-suk remained standing, silent, exposed, diminished. For the first time that night, the joke had ended. And he wasn't laughing. The doors closed behind them with a soft, final sound. It wasn't loud. But to Kang Jun-suk, it echoed like a verdict. For several long seconds after Amara and Park Minjay disappeared into the elevator corridor, no one spoke. The ballroom, once buzzing with laughter, ego and noise, felt hollow like a body after the soul had stepped out. Jun-suk stood alone at the center of it. Not physically alone, there were dozens of powerful men and women around him, but something had shifted. The space around him felt wider, colder, empty. Someone cleared their throat. Another man suddenly found the crystal chandelier very interesting. No one laughed anymore. Jun-suk slowly sat back down, his movements stiff. He reached for his glass, then stopped when he realized his hand was trembling. Get it together. This is getting awkward, he said, forcing a chuckle. Let's continue. No one responded. An older syndicate head leaned toward another and murmured, That woman? She's with Minjay. That explains the contracts. The words sliced deeper than any insult. Jun-suk's jaw tightened. He replayed the night in his mind, frame by frame, like a mistake he could no longer edit out. The cafe. The glasses. The quiet way she listened more than she spoke. He had dismissed her because she didn't demand attention. How many times had she been there while his empire bled money? A memory surfaced uninvited. Weeks ago, late night, he'd stormed out of a meeting furious over a failed dock negotiation. He remembered seeing her through the cafe window, head bent over papers, scribbling calculations while his men complained behind him. He had laughed then too. She's always reading, he'd said. Must think she's smarter than us. The realization hit like ice water. She was. Jun-suk stood abruptly again. I need air, he snapped. No one stopped him. As he stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city, the cold wind slapped his face, but it did nothing to cool the heat rising in his chest. Below, Seoul glittered, millions of lights, countless lives moving without him. For the first time he felt irrelevant. Jealousy coiled tight and ugly in his gut. Not because Amara was beautiful. Not because Minjay was powerful. But because she had chosen him. Jun-suk clenched the railing. She should have been grateful. That thought startled him. And then disgusted him. Inside, conversations resumed, quietly, carefully, but the tone had changed. Minjay's name floated through the room like a shadow. So that's who closed the East expansion. She's the strategist. No wonder the numbers didn't add up. Each word carved deeper. Jun-suk returned to the ballroom just in time to hear someone say, inviting her here was reckless. Another added, insulting her was suicidal. They fell silent when they noticed him. Jun-suk forced a smile. You're all overreacting. A man he once considered an ally shook his head. You embarrassed her. So? Jun-suk snapped. She's not. Not what? The man asked calmly. The question hung. Jun-suk didn't answer. Because for the first time he didn't know. Meanwhile, in the elevator descending smoothly into the city's glow, Amara finally exhaled. Her knees felt weak now that the adrenaline was fading. Minjay noticed immediately. He adjusted his stance subtly, steadying her without drawing attention. You were perfect, he said. She laughed softly, breathless. I thought I was going to pass out. You didn't. She leaned her head back against the elevator wall. He never saw me. Minjay's gaze softened. He saw what he wanted to see. The elevator doors opened. Outside, the night air wrapped around them, cool and alive. Minjay held the car door open for her. You okay? He asked again, quieter this time. She nodded. I am now. Back at the hotel, Jun-suk drank. Too fast. The alcohol burned, but he welcomed it. Regret crept in slowly, like poison diluted just enough to taste sweet at first. He remembered how she'd stood there, alone, while the room laughed. How she hadn't begged, hadn't cried, hadn't left. That was what haunted him most. She stayed. Not because she needed him, but because she didn't. Later that night, after the guests trickled out, Jun-suk sat alone at the long table, staring at the empty chair where Amara had waited. The chair beside it, Minjay's, felt like a wound. One of his men approached hesitantly. Boss, should we do something? Jun-suk didn't look up. Yes, he said quietly. What? He stared at the glass doors through which she had walked out. Find out everything about her. The man hesitated. You mean, for leverage? Jun-suk's jaw tightened. No, he said. For understanding. Because somewhere deep beneath the jealousy and regret, a terrifying thought had taken root. The woman he mocked might be the one person who could have changed everything. And now, she belonged to someone else. Morning came too quickly for Kang Jun-suk. Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, turning the city below into something deceptively peaceful. From this height, Seoul looked obedient. Ordered. Jun-suk felt neither. He hadn't slept. The events of the banquet replayed relentlessly. Amara's calm voice, the way the room had shifted when Minjay arrived, the silence that followed them out. Worst of all was the memory of his own laughter echoing back at him, distorted now, ugly. A sharp knock broke the quiet. Come in. His right-hand man Daeho stepped inside, face tight. We have a problem. Jun-suk didn't look up. Say it. The Eastern docks just suspended our shipments. That got his attention. What? Daeho swallowed. 3 contracts. Frozen. No explanation given. Jun-suk's fingers curled slowly into a fist. Minjay. Across the city, Amara sat at a long table bathed in natural light, papers spread neatly before her. The space was quiet, minimalist, no gold, no excess. Power here was measured in clarity, not intimidation. Minjay watched her from across the room as she worked. She was in her element now, glasses off, sleeves rolled up, pen moving decisively. There was nothing nerdy about her when she focused. She commanded the room without raising her voice. This clause, she said, tapping a document, is where they thought they were clever. Minjay leaned in. They weren't. No, she agreed. They were sloppy. She slid the papers back toward him. This pause will hurt them. Not permanently, but enough to make a point. Minjay nodded. Do you want it to go further? He asked. Amara hesitated. No, she said finally. Not unless they force it. Minjay smiled faintly. That's why I trust you. Back in Jun-suk's office, the air thickened with tension. This is retaliation, Jun-suk snapped. He's sending a message. Daeho nodded. People are already talking. Quietly. Jun-suk stood, pacing. Set up a meeting. Today. With Minjay. Yes. Daeho hesitated. And her? Jun-suk stopped. Yes, he said. The meeting took place in neutral territory, a private tea house overlooking a river. No weapons in sight. No raised voices. But the tension was lethal. Minjay arrived first. Amara sat beside him, composed, unreadable. When Jun-suk entered, he felt it immediately, the difference. No one laughed. No one deferred to him automatically. He was not in control here. Thank you for coming, Jun-suk said stiffly, taking a seat across from them. Minjay inclined his head. Speak. Jun-suk glanced at Amara. She met his gaze without warmth. I didn't know, he began. Minjay raised a hand. This isn't about what you knew, he said calmly. It's about what you did. Jun-suk swallowed. It was a joke. Amara leaned forward slightly. Jokes are meant to make people laugh, she said. Not remind them they're powerless. Silence stretched. I was wrong, Jun-suk said quietly. It cost him something to say it. Minjay studied him carefully. Wrong enough to change? Jun-suk clenched his jaw. Yes. Amara spoke again. Then listened carefully. She slid a document across the table. These are the terms under which your shipments resume. Jun-suk scanned them, disbelief flashing across his face. You're asking for oversight. Transparency, she corrected. And if I refuse? Minjay's voice dropped. Then this becomes permanent. The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Jun-suk leaned back, realization sinking in. This wasn't revenge. This was restructuring. Amara wasn't humiliating him. She was protecting herself, and others, from men like him. Slowly he nodded. I accept. Amara studied him for a long moment. Good, she said. Then this ends here. Minjay stood. So do we, he added. As they left, Jun-suk remained seated, staring at the river. For the first time, power felt conditional. And far easier to lose than he'd ever imagined. That evening, Amara and Minjay stood on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. You didn't have to go that easy, Minjay said. Amara smiled faintly. Easy isn't the same as weak. He studied her, admiration clear. You know that night changed everything. She nodded. For him. Minjay took her hand. For us too. She squeezed back. Yes, she said softly. But this time on our terms. Weeks later, the city felt different to Kang Jun-suk. Not because Seoul had changed, but because he had. From the windows of his office, the skyline still glittered, but it no longer bowed to him. Every deal now required careful review. Every signature passed through layers of oversight he hadn't needed before. The world had not ended, but it had become smaller, more cautious. Controlled. And at the center of it all was a name he couldn't stop thinking about. Amara Lewis. Not spoken aloud. Not mocked. Not dismissed. Respected. At the cafe by Pier 9, life moved at a gentler pace. The tables were the same. The windows still fogged in the mornings. The bell above the door chimed softly as customers came and went. But Amara no longer worked there. The chair where she once sat with her books remained empty most nights, a quiet monument to someone who had outgrown the space. A new manager ran the cafe now, funded discreetly through a trust Amara had set up. Fair wages. Reasonable hours. Safety measures. She hadn't burned the place down. She built it up. Amara stood on the balcony of a high-rise overlooking the river, wind lifting the edges of her coat. She no longer wore oversized sweaters to disappear. Her style was still simple, but intentional. Minjay joined her, handing her a cup of tea. Thinking? He asked. She smiled. Remembering. He leaned against the railing. Regrets. She shook her head. Lessons. They watched the water flow silently for a moment. You know, Minjay said, people talk about you now. She laughed softly. I figured. They say you're dangerous. She raised an eyebrow. Am I? He smiled. Only to people who underestimate you. Across the city, Jun-suk sat in the same underground club where it had all begun. The laughter was quieter now. His men still respected him, but they watched him differently. Carefully. Waiting for cues instead of scrambling to please. He lifted his glass, then set it down untouched. I made a mistake, he said suddenly. The men froze. Daeho glanced at him. About the docks? No, Jun-suk replied. About a woman I thought was small. No one laughed. Because no one thought it was funny anymore. Amara received an envelope one afternoon. No return address, no threats. Just a note inside. I was wrong. You deserved better. Kidjes. She read it once. Then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not as a trophy. Not as closure. But as proof that power didn't always win, awareness did. One evening Minjay took her back to the Dragon Crown Hotel. Not for a banquet. For dinner. They sat at a quiet corner table overlooking the city lights. No audience. No spectacle. As dessert arrived, Minjay reached across the table. I never thanked you, he said. For what? For reminding me why I build things instead of destroying them. She smiled softly. I never wanted revenge. I know, he said. That's what makes you terrifying. She laughed genuinely this time. As they left, Amara paused in the lobby. She glanced once toward the ballroom entrance, the place where she'd once stood alone under 1,000 judging eyes. Minjay followed her gaze. Want to go in? She shook her head. No. She took his hand instead. I already walked out with everything I needed. They stepped into the night. Behind them the doors closed gently. No applause. No humiliation. Just the quiet certainty that the last laugh didn't need an audience. Because the woman who had been invited for a joke had rewritten the ending.